I was going to bring Self-Care Sundays back to this channel tonight. I had the video all planned. I was going to talk about how not to let fear of the pandemic and social distancing regulations interfere with your enjoyment of summer 2020. Well, we're shelving that video idea because we've got much bigger fish to fry. I'm Linda. This is Linda's World. This is John Lennon on my t-shirt for a reason. And I'd like to talk about the murder of George Floyd and all of the events that have occurred in America ever since. I'm not going to do anything fancy with this video like cool fonts or graphics or pics or songs, because I think the situation deserves more humility, dignity, and respect than that. So if it's all the same to you, I'm just going to get right into it. Now, the other day, I did what I do every single morning, which is I opened my phone and I checked my social media. Now, I've got all the social media platforms, and across every single news feed I have, the words "I can't breathe" were peppered all through my screen. Now, "I can't breathe" is a phrase synonymous with Eric Garner, the black man from Staten Island who was taken into police custody, taken into a chokehold on the streets of Staten Island, and killed by the officers. I thought perhaps it was the anniversary of the event for a moment. A quick dive into the situation led me to an 8-minute video that I watched and that I could only describe as a snuff film. I watched someone get murdered in broad daylight because I was watching what happened to George Floyd. I pressed play, and I watched a black man and a white officer and several other attending officers. I watched that man get pinned to the street, right on the cement in Minnesota. I watched the arresting officer take his knee and compress it into the back of the neck of the gentleman on the ground. I watched him give his full body weight to the stance. I watched the other officers shielding the area so that the situation couldn't be interfered with. I heard passers-by and bystanders in the street saying things like, "Bro, let him up. How long are you going to hold him, bro? Bro, what are you doing?" And I heard the gentleman on the floor repeatedly say, "I can't breathe," more laboriously each time he said it. I heard him use the word "please" a lot. I heard him ask for a glass of water or something, please. Later, I read this. I didn't hear this per se, but a person online wrote that they had heard him ask for his mom. And by the end of the video, George Floyd was dead. Right there in broad daylight, in the middle of a Minnesota street. His crime? The people at the store he'd been patronizing assumed he'd been forging a check. Now he's dead. Now, in my 43 years of life, I have lost count of the amount of times I've heard of situations where people of color have a situation with law enforcement that doesn't end well. And so, quite frankly, my first thought was, my God, again, because I've heard this story all too often. Now, I don't subscribe to this theory, but there are people who, in the past, with other people of color and situations such as this, they have had situations where they said, well, they mistook the thing they were holding in their hands for a weapon, or they had been resisting arrest, or they had been under the influence of drugs and alcohol, or they had been presented in a threatening manner. There's various other things that, people have said in defense of police actions in the past when dealing with people of color in this manner. Well, in this instance, and I'm not saying those things were correct either, but in this instance, there wasn't any of that. There was a guy put to the ground by another guy and killed. Pure and simple. There's no question. I watched a murder on my phone. And quite frankly, I don't know what the hell to do with that. I don't know what the hell to do with a situation where a person was murdered in broad daylight and his only crime was that his pigment was darker than mine. That's the way I look at it. I look at it as, we're people walking around on planet Earth and everyone has different skin pigment, and George Floyd's skin pigment was darker. So they killed him. That's what it seems like to me. Am I missing something here? And so it got me to thinking about the concept of how it's 2020, and still to this day, there are people walking around saying phrases like, "all lives matter." Hi, I'm editing this video right now, and I just want to throw in something I missed, which is that, of course, all lives matter. That's never been in question. It just simply seems as though the lives of people of color matter a little less to law enforcement, and it's time that stopped. That's what Black Lives Matter is all about. It's not calling into question anyone else's life. It's ensuring the lives of people who are black. That's all. It got me to thinking that there are people in this day and age still who assume that if a person is darker than they are in the street, trouble will break out. It still happens in 2020 that simply by nature of pigment, a person's dealings with the people who are supposed to serve and protect and defend them could end in bloodshed for no specific reason other than their pigment. And I don't even know what to say. Now, as an English teacher, I have to throw a literary reference at you because that's just how I explain things. Now, in To Kill a Mockingbird, very briefly, the story goes that Tom Robinson, a black man in 1930s Alabama, was sentenced to death for a capital crime, the rape of a white woman, which he did not commit. And he, instead of facing the appeal of the court, he actually went over the wall of the prison, and they shot him down, and he was dead. And later on in school, the narrator of the story, Scout, was sitting in school, and they were talking about how America's a democracy. And what sets us apart from the Nazis in Germany is that we're a democracy, and we never persecute people because they're different than us. And the irony was just too loud. Well, that book was written about the 1930s. That's almost 100 years ago. And tonight, I'm sitting here with John Lennon, champion of peace, on my t-shirt because it's the only symbolism I could muster up today from my house to make this video about how horrified I am that we continue to live in a democracy, or so we call it, as this situation occurs. I still find it horrifying that people don't realize that white privilege exists. I can't get over the fact that there's an actual hashtag that says Blue Lives Matter, because first of all, there's no such thing as a blue life. And second of all, if the police want to shield themselves, and if the police are worried for their own lives, well, perhaps they need to look at their own actions first and wonder why the hell people don't like them. You know, could it be because they are choking people to death in the middle of a street over their pigment? Imagine that. Now, later on in the week, because people feel as I feel, there were protests all around America. That's wonderful. On a side note, I'd like to point out that someone had taken video earlier today, and it was on Instagram, of Ariana Grande in the middle of the protest in total anonymity and just walking with the people on her sign. And that's why I love her. But the thing is, the protesters broke out, and people were, they had their Black Lives Matter signs up, and they were trying to, exercise their rage and their anger at the injustice that is the situation with George Floyd and others, quite frankly. And in one instance, and I can't even get over this, there was a barricade. This was in my hometown. This was in New York City. There was a barricade, and there were people behind it, and they were protesting, and they were peaceful. They weren't causing a ruckus. They didn't light anything on fire. They were standing there with their signs. And a police vehicle rammed into the crowd. And that's what you're doing now? You're just randomly killing off citizens because they either they don't have the right pigment, or they have the audacity to stand up for the rights of people whose skin color differs from theirs. Is that what we're doing now? We're just randomly mowing people down? I can't believe I live in America in 2020 when this is true. Now, different people in my life have many different views. And in the past couple of days, I've seen a wide array of differing opinions on social media. One person, for example, earlier today I saw was asking for us to pray for the police because their lives might be in danger. Well, perhaps they should have thought of that when they started endangering ours, right? Another person today said that they couldn't believe that people had broken quarantine to go outside and start looting. And I thought to myself, well, I haven't seen any looting yet. And to me, looting has always been the last-ditch alternative to a culture that has been held down so long that they can no longer mentally or financially afford anything for which they are looting. And quite frankly, I saw another person saying that we shouldn't that we shouldn't be blaming the powers that be because they're just voicing an opinion that secretly all of us have. And I don't have that opinion. I don't automatically look at a person whose pigment is different than mine and assume that they're up to no good. I don't automatically assume that if a person is up to no good or allegedly up to no good, that that person deserves to be pinned to the cement like a dog and had the oxygen ripped out of him. That's not justice. That's racism. Pure and simple. Now, I could wax poetic about this forever. This could be like a 4-hour video because we all know I love to pontificate. But I am so... I guess this one hit me different. Not that the other ones didn't mean anything, but I think that this one hit me different because I've never seen a more blatant act of racism lead to a person being taken from the planet before. You know, I've heard it before. I've seen them die, but this one, I don't even know what to say. And I know I say that often, but it's because I don't know what to say. Now, I've spoken to you now for 11 minutes, so I'm going to start reining it in. And I'm going to tell you that what the police don't understand when they pin an individual to the ground and remove their oxygen until they're dead, what they don't understand is that they are removing from planet Earth an individual, a person. They are not taking away, they're not deprogramming a robot. They're killing a person. They're taking away someone's dad, someone's brother, someone's drinking buddy, someone's movie partner, someone's cousin, someone's husband, someone's friend, someone's good customer, someone's neighbor. You know, they are removing from a family a member who has a crucial space in that family tree. They're fixing it so that that family will never ever again be intact because there's a seat missing at the Thanksgiving table. They are removing from that family the ability to come together and reminisce about the past, enjoy the present, and plan for the future. They are removing a future from that person because of their pigment. And I've never in a million years thought that I would be sitting in my house at what is now 9:30 on a Sunday night talking about this into a camera and knowing that there may actually be people who watch this and don't agree because for some reason they're still hung up on the fact that pigment means bad. That darkness of skin is a darkness of character. That a lightness of skin automatically absolves us of all sins. You know, some of America's most insane serial killers were white, by the way. And I can't believe that after all we've seen and all we've been through and all of the things that were fought for in the 50s and in the 60s, after Rosa Parks sat down on that bus, after children had wild dogs and fire hoses thrown at them in the mid-60s in protest when all they wanted to do was to drink from the same water fountain that I do. After Martin Luther King spoke the words, "I might not get there with you," and then he was shot 12 hours later. After all of the things that we have seen in the civil rights movement and quite frankly, in humanity, for as long as I've been alive and even longer, that I still have to make this video. I'm mad that I'm making this video. I'm mad that my camera's even on right now and that people are going to hear me talk like it's news. I'm not not going to say anything further because I fear that I'm going to start to repeat myself, because I do that often. But I'd like to address one final thing. Earlier today, I happened to hear the song by Stevie Wonder, A Black Man, You Haven't Done Nothing. And it's one of my favorite songs by him. And he says, and I quote, and we're sick and tired of hearing your song about how you're going to change right from wrong. And if you really want to hear our views, you haven't done nothing. That's it. That's my piece. I've said it. I'd like to close with another song quote. John Lennon once said, imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the worlds could be as one. And quite frankly, right now, on May 31st, 2020, at 9:42 at night as I conclude this video, I don't know that John Lennon's words will ever come true. I think that it's quite frankly a pipe dream. And if that's true, there's nothing for us left on this planet. We might all just check in our humanity cards at the door. Because how many more of these is it going to be? What's going to be the one that gets people to go, you know something? We better knock it off. Is this it? If it isn't, I don't know that we can continue as a planet. Just saying. I'm going to go now. And I'm going to try to do what I do best, which is harness my anger for good while also taking the proper escape routes mentally so I don't let this get to me. Because if it does, I run the risk of doing regretful things because I feel passionate enough about this to do them. And I think that we should just let history speak for itself. Let the American people do what they do best, which is rally around a cause. And let the family of George Floyd know that he may not be with us here physically anymore, but damned if his death isn't in vain, because this might just be the change. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe John Lennon's words will come true. It remains to be seen. I'm going to disappear now because I don't want to talk in circles anymore. Good night.